Welcome back to the Juiced Up Podcast. I'm Grant. We got Mike on the other side of things. We're going part 2 of our Advent series. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into a few more scriptures here and kind of lead up to the coming of Jesus. But before we do that, we're gonna start it off with a little question. So, Mike, you ready?
Sure.
Oh, for starters, why did the soft
We're,
tossing lefty say that the softball idea came from you? Where did that come from? You not give the credit where it's due, or what?
I don't know. I don't go around patrolling soft tossing lefties mentions, but I did think that was kind of sketch. I don't. He tagged me and Willie. He didn't tag you, and I don't know. I could probably check the text threads. I may have sent him something because it's not off. That's very on brand for me to send a text like, "Yo, this is not my idea at all. Why am I being tagged?" But,
Yeah, I mean, look, soft tossing lefty. I'm not trying to start any beef, but it'd be nice to give some credit where it's due. Um, Tag Luis Severino next time. Anyways, now that that's out of the way, I did
hot
hear.
start, hot start for episode 4. Soft tossing lefty already catching strays. What do you got?
I mean, he is probably our biggest viewer, so we do gotta shout him out for that.
Yeah.
Um, but I did hear on a podcast, and I think we can kind of relate this to our study. Um, the best leaders are often the best communicators. Agree or disagree or
Hmm.
neutral?
I mean, I'm not going to disagree. That's kind of I don't think that that's a pretty simple statement to make. I mean, I think if you look at the opposite, that bad leaders are not good communicators. I think that probably resonates a little more too. That I don't think it's necessary, but I don't think. I mean, what do you mean by communication?
Yeah, so
Like,
I think you can kind of take that in a couple, couple different lenses. I think that based on the individual, everyone has their own way of being a communicator. I would say I'm definitely more of like an introverted. I'd say you probably fall into that category too. And so I think this podcast really helps me to just get a way to get my thoughts out. Um, but with that said, like I think that having a sense of humility is important to being a good communicator. And I think that comes with the fact that when you almost think that you're always right all the time, it's hard for people to get to a respect factor in you, and it's going to be hard to portray what you want to communicate when individuals are always trying to be right or trying
Mhm.
to show their side of things. And so I think by communication, I think the big part of communication is having a sense of humility.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate this to a conversation I had with someone lately, and we talked a lot about how leadership, you kind of see that based on, do people listen to you?
Hmm.
And I think that's the relate, because I mean,
That's a
you
good
can
point.
be a leader and you can have all the great posts, you can have all the great sound bites and the motivational thing, but at the end of the day, like if you're a coach, when you tell your player to do something, do they listen to you and they're really polite and then they just go off and don't do it? Or do you just yell stuff at them and they don't really do it or they don't really understand you? Because at the end of the day, if you're trying to be a leader, you're going to take time to make sure that somebody understands what you're saying. So I think that's where that correlation comes about.
So
And
would
I'd
you
also
say that leaders have to almost prove themselves as leaders, or would you say that leaders are almost just inherently leaders and people can kind of
I
just
think
gravitate
that
towards that?
people have an innate sense that we need to feel like we need to prove ourselves as leaders. And I think that's where it relates to your humility aspect. That I mean, I've
So
been
I
on
have this take
teams.
that if you have
Yeah,
to
go ahead.
say that,
Go
I
ahead.
have this take that if you have to physically say that you're a leader, like if you have to say like, oh, I'm trying to lead these people, I would argue that you're not necessarily a leader because I
Yeah,
feel like if you have to
that's
prove that
yeah.
you're a leader, then you're not necessarily a leader. I'm going to go off of this verse right here. Um, so we got John 3 verse 30. He must become greater, I must become less. I think if you look at Jesus and you look at his leadership qualities, because he built up that respect of what he was trying to do with all of humankind, they chose to follow him because they respected him as a leader. I don't think he necessarily had to almost like prove himself. I mean, I guess in a sense he did to some of the people that were, not believing in him right away. But I think then he just rebuked them by saying, look, you can't just follow me based on what you see physically. You have to look deeper into your heart. And so I think if we go back to this concept of leadership and what makes a good leader, and then even add in the communication and the listening and the humility aspect, I think that if a person truly wants to lead, they need to first have a sense of humility and have a sense of they're serving a greater purpose before they try to get people to buy into what they're trying to portray.
Yeah. I mean, realistically, we say we say leader like it's because anybody can be a leader. You don't have to be a boss or a coach
Mhm.
or a president or a world leader. Like, you don't have to have a position of authority, but our society is designed to have positions of authority, whether that's in a family, that's in government, that's in team settings, that's in a job. So I think the reality is a lot of people you're going to have to say, I want to be a better leader if you're in one of those positions where it is your given responsibility to lead people.
Mhm.
The nature of this question it's not about just being a leader, it's being a good leader.
Mhm.
Like, you could pick your politician of choice or pick your coach of choice, and you can say subjectively or objectively, I guess, but you could say they're a good leader or they're a bad leader. But think about, but the reality is they're still the leader. When
Right.
you're on a college baseball team, you're on a high school baseball team, or in pro ball and any, he's like, your coach is your coach. He's the one that's setting the lineup. He's the one that's making the tough decisions through wherever you're at in that. And again, if you want to relate this to Jesus, everything too, that God is the one making the decisions, and that He's the one that's given the authority to the people to make the decisions. And I don't want to get too deep into the structure of the church, but there's that structure as well, that people are making decisions and they're given responsibility. And I think where Jesus comes in is he's a very good example of, he had that appointed authority, but he wanted to be humble with it. He wanted to approach you from the sense that, hey, I want to lead you because I really care about you and I want to share your experiences. I want to listen to you. I want to understand you, and I want to guide you the right way. And I think that's the admiral part of it.
Yeah.
And
No, I think that's good. I think one thing I'll add too is just with leadership and even with trying to get better at communication or just being a better listener, I think that involves a sense of wisdom as well. And I think a lot of people in today's world, we get confused as to where to get our wisdom from. I think we think wisdom is something that we just grow over time with age, which in a sense is true. I think as we age and as we have more experience, our wisdom grows. But I think also we can just relate that to understanding, going back to the foundation that God is the source of all wisdom, and through him we can learn experiences through people, or through not people but through Jesus, and then through other individuals throughout scripture that had an, like you mentioned, an authoritative role of leadership. And we can use their mistake, we can also just use their successes as a way to understand how we can apply wisdom into the world. So I think it's like understanding leadership in a bigger lens rather than just such a closed-minded view of like leadership requires hard work and all these little things that
yeah,
society would want to tell us, and to kind of like look deeper into that root of like, okay, these are people in history that have had good leadership qualities, what makes them a good leadership quality, and kind of pull wisdom from there. But that's my rant on leadership. I just thought it was
it's
a
a
good question on the pod
good
that
rant.
I heard.
What was it again that prompted you in your life to consider the fundamental nature of leaderships?
Oh, it was just a podcast. It was just, he said that the best leaders are the best communicators. And I don't think that's talked about in leadership enough. I think for a lot of times when you hear about leaders, it's like it's honestly, it's like the opposite of communicator. Just like the best leaders just tell you what to do. But it's like, no, the best leaders are probably humble in the sense that they can have a conversation and they can have the ability to be wrong and have a fluent conversation where it's just not me feeding information down your throat or the other way around. So now that we got that rant out of the way, what exactly are we talking about today? What scriptures we got planned?
Yeah, we're gonna go out of biblical order because sometimes you just need to go in order to fit the narrative and tell the story rather than read page one to page, how many are in here? Page 2000 or whatever. But the Bible's not just an ordinary book. It's not just something you pick up and start to finish, you read, but we got Isaiah 11, chapter 11, verses 1 until you see fit. And then we're going to go with Jeremiah verses 23, verse or 23, 5, and then Isaiah 9, 6. So last week we gave sort of the creation, there's the foundations of Christmas. We're going to kind of keep going along to that this week throughout the Old Testament into the prophets. But we also got a lot of subtopics just about those too that we can expand upon and reflect on preparation for Advent. So why don't you want to read chapter 11 of Isaiah? Go from 1 to 9. Go through the whole thing. This is a good one.
1 to 9. A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse, from his roots a branch will bear fruit. The Spirit of the Lord will rest on him, the Spirit of wisdom and of understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and fear of the Lord. And he will delight in the fear of the Lord. He will not judge by what he sees with his eyes, or decide by what he hears with his ears. But with righteousness he will judge the needy. With justice he will give decisions for the poor of the earth. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth. With the breath of his lips he will slay the wicked. Righteousness will be his belt, and faithfulness the sash around his waist. The wolf will live with the lamb, the leopard will lie down with the goat, the calf and the lion and the yearling together, and a little child will lead them. The cow will feed with the bear, their young will lie down together, and the lion will eat the straw like the ox. The infant will play near the cobra's den, the young child will put its hand into the viper's nest. They will neither harm nor destroy on all my holy mountain, for the earth will be filled with knowledge of the Lord as the water covers the sea.
For podcasting purposes, anyone who's listening and is reading, praying along with us, feel free, pause us right now. If you want to read that again, you can do sort of a lectio divina. So do that with any of our verses. I'm kind of even trying to do that myself, to just kind of read through it a couple of times because we're trying to pick verses that are pretty obvious to us and pretty obvious just in general
Mm-hmm.
about where there's connections to Jesus, where there's big picture connections in scripture. That because there is a lot there. I mean, there's like how many chapters of Isaiah are there? 60?
66, I think.
66 chapters of Isaiah. And obviously all of it's important because it's in the Bible, but some of it is a little more urgent, I'd say. Some of it's a little more, you read it and you can immediately see the biblical applications. So
Yeah.
just get that out there. Because, like, yeah, a shoot shall sprout from the stump of Jesse. We left off with this last week. This is all pointing to a new David,
Mm-hmm.
which, if you look along the lines of salvation history, David had his purpose in establishing the kingdom, and Jesus was going to come and expand that. And then, even through, I mean, providential how it works out that you want to talk about leadership. Well, we're talking about a spirit of wisdom and understanding. We have justice, we have righteousness, we got all those words in there. And if you want to really simplify it, it's Isaiah saying that God's going to send a leader of men. And the biblical importance is that we see that because of Jesse passing on to David, because of that line that, as we mentioned last week, that's going to eventually lead to St. Joseph and then to Jesus, is that all of that is to keep consistent and to show that God has a very thorough plan.
Mm-hmm.
Me and you are just winging this in many ways. We're just kind of talking. We're
What did we
seeing
say before the pod? What's our
What?
plan? And you said you thought I had a plan, and I thought you
Yeah.
had a plan.
No, I mean, I think it's very clear by episode 3.5 of the Juiced Up Pod that we're kind of just throwing the balls out and playing right now. But
Yeah,
God isn't his plan for salvation is not exactly like that.
I'm gonna take that one step further.
Go for it. Go for it, please.
We just randomly decide to throw a rant on leadership, and then you randomly throw in picked Isaiah 11, 1 through 9.
I didn't randomly pick Isaiah 11. That I was actually trying to do. I just randomly
Trying to
found
prove a point here. So
it.
you had Isaiah 11, 1 through 9 picked out, but the leadership thing was pre-pod. We didn't even think
That
about
was pre-pod. You can't, but I
it. So
can
I'm
look
just
into
saying that the
that.
correlation is pretty sweet.
Yeah, correlation always equals causation. Mookie Betts uses the dog toy, and Saquon Barkley squats a lot. So if I just do those two things, I'll be a really good hitter, and I'll be able to be really strong.
You can clip that one.
Don't clip that. That was kind of mid. I didn't know where I was going.
Hold on, I want to break this one down. He will
Yeah,
not
go for it.
judge by what he sees with his eyes, or decides by what he hears with his ears, but with the righteousness he will judge the needy. And I think it kind of just shows how it kind of goes back to that verse we were talking about last week about God judging the heart and
Mhm.
talking about how it was Samuel, right?
Yeah.
First Samuel, and how I think we so often, even if we go back to this quality, we're just going to stick with the theme of leadership. We go back to this idea of leadership. I think we have this picture already pre-painted into our heads of what a leader should look like. And it's crazy because I think the religious people at the time had this preconceived notion of what they thought Jesus was going to be. And we'll really kind of get into it here in a few weeks as far as like his coming into the world was anything but like this huge production of things. Like he was born in a manger, wrapped in cloth. Like it wasn't like this like super rich way of coming into the world. And so I think people could very easily look at that appearance of things and completely write it off. This verse is kind of showing how when we don't judge things with what we see with our eyes, or even judge people based on their actions or their wrongs or anything, or their past or something like that, but when we actually look at the inside of their heart and we can start to really get to know the person that way, I think it's just a cool thing to look into.
I mean, at the end of the day, if you judge somebody only by their successes, you're gonna have a biased view. And if you judge them only by their ugliness or by their just whatever's wrong with them, that makes them evil or makes them flawed.
Yeah,
If you judge by one or the other, like exclusively, you're gonna leave out something.
right.
And that's kind of where that idea of forgiveness, that idea of being righteous and just is to be objective in what you're doing, I think, with that. Jeremiah 23:5. That's the next one. See, days are coming, oracle of the Lord. Well, I will raise up a righteous branch for David. As a king, he shall reign and govern wisely. He shall do what is just and right in the land. In his days, leadership. This is,
I'm saying, dude,
we'll just reflect on that. The 23:5, literally. He is a king, he will reign and govern wisely. He shall do what is right and just in the land.
I'm saying.
We want to, yeah, we're not just throwing out Bible verses to show that God says be a good leader. This is more of Advent. We're reflecting on the fact that God has sent us the leader,
Hmm.
which is himself. He is the ultimate leader. And I think that's an important lesson too. That's the reminder of Advent and all this is that what is coming in Christmas? God is coming. What is he coming for? To save us.
Word of brownies.
We're devotees. That was the most like basic Christian preacher thing anyone has ever said. I
It's
just
true.
summed it up. Yeah, I can do it.
Sometimes simple as easy.
Yeah, it's a reason. It's the message that everybody goes to. Is at the end of the day, you can pull up Jeremiah 23, and it's pretty practical. But
Yeah. No, I think all these are just showing that, like you said, they're pointing towards
yeah,
like a greater kind of a greater purpose behind it all. I
yeah,
mean, even if we look at the Old Testament, like there's a bunch of stories you could get into about sin and drawing away from God and God's judgment on people and wiping out the nation, but it ultimately shows how even through all of that, through all of humanity's mistakes, God has a greater purpose. He's sending a leader that's fit for the role in himself, and he will save all of the world. It's pretty cool.
So the other thing that I will just say though is that the way we're presenting it, it does seem very easy and that God was just planning and everything, but like
Truth.
these are people that are prophets, and like Jeremiah's life was pretty challenging. He was called to his task in the
Let's
13th year.
dive that into a little bit. Talk
Yeah,
about
he was called into his task in the 13th year of King Josiah. His reform began with enthusiasm as hope, ended with his death on the battlefield of Megiddo, which was 609 BC. He was born in perhaps 650 BC, so he died at 41. As he attempted to stop the northward march of the Egyptian pharaoh Necho, I probably said that wrong, who was going to provide assistance to the Assyrians who were in retreat before the Babylonians. The prophet supported the reform of King Josiah, but after the death of Josiah, the old idolatry returned, which that would explain why he's fighting against all of this. Jeremiah opposed this as well as royal policy towards Babylon. Arrest, imprisonment, and public disgrace were his lot. In the nation's apostasy, Jeremiah saw the sealing of its doom. Nebuchadnezzar captured Jerusalem and carried King Jehoiam into exile. The prophet Jeremiah remained in Jerusalem, but was later forced into Egyptian exile. We do not know the details of his death. The influence of Jeremiah was greater after his death than before. You know, that's one thing that I don't know if this has been taught in your circles, but with the baptism that we receive, as I've been taught in Catholic tradition, we're gifted into the three titles of Jesus: the priest, prophet, and king. So, in a way, what Jesus does is he opens us, and then we all have that sort of. We can all serve as the priests who are offering the sacrifice. We
Mhm.
can serve as the prophets who are listening to God and offering the wisdom, and as the king who can rule over his dominion. Layman's terms, Jeremiah just had a hard life serving God.
Yeah, and I think that kind of shows too. It's like I think a lot of people will think that like you follow God, all your problems go away. And I think when you actually start to follow God and actually live out His word, it's like your problems almost become, I wouldn't say greater to an extent, but they start to feel more, or they feel more real when we put that target on our back. People want to try to steer us away from that because they want this instant gratification world of knowing all the answers when we're just not meant to know some things.
Yeah, that's my only challenge to that is how do people really know what they want when they're trying to steer you away?
That's a good point
And
too.
that's something that we can kind of just reflect on in our earlier conversations that I don't think everybody is necessarily anti-Christ or anti-Christian, but it is weird that
I feel
so
like
much.
they're
I mean,
just
Jesus
anti
has
not
to
knowing.
say what?
It's like we're anti not knowing.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what you said there was really good. That a lot of times once you start going into more your faith, life gets harder because whether it's you're overthinking everything, you're just being more aware of how flawed you are. And I think like just from a lot of the really like people who are really into the faith that I know, like it's almost like they have a lot of desolation. They have a lot of hardships in prayer. There's a lot of times in prayer when God's not, you don't feel like he's talking to you, or you don't really feel like he's working. I think the one thing that to communicate to that is I know because I've been in that position, I know people that have been in that position. The one thing to reinforce is that personal love that God loves you, and just because your life is hard does not mean that God has abandoned you.
If anything, I feel like it means you're doing something right. I feel like
Yeah,
I feel like when your life is getting harder and harder and like
yeah,
it's feeling like you don't know the direction and which way to head. I think
Yeah.
that's when God's working the most because you're fully starting to understand that you're giving your life to God and you're not sure what direction it's heading, but you're giving a full faith and a full trust in Him that He is going to provide a plan, and that plan is going to probably look at entirely different to what you mapped out in your journal or you mapped out in your business plan or whatever it may be. But when you give your life to God, I think some really cool things can start to happen. And again,
Yeah.
it starts by just taking that step into the unknown, and kind of like the life of Jeremiah, like he just immediately committed his life to God, and there was kind of no looking back on it. And he knew that there was going to be some hardships that came with that,
Mhm.
but he just kind of stayed the course. What's that
Yeah.
verse? Running the race,
I told you I don't remember the Bible.
dude. You
I know John 3:16. For Christ so loved the world that he gave his only son. For God so loved the world. I'm pretty sure I just messed that up too.
oh, I have fought the good fight. I've finished the race. I've kept the faith. 2 Timothy 4 verse 7. Keep the faith. Keep running.
Who's gonna carry the boat and the logs? They don't know me, son.
Hey, 4 miles today.
Really?
Yeah,
0 miles.
you gotta start somewhere.
I'll go run on the treadmill after this.
Why?
I'll
Just get outside. Literally, you can walk outside and start running.
It's true. I
Don't
can.
get shot in Springfield though.
No comment. I'd like to edit
What we
this.
got? We got one more here, right?
Yeah. Isaiah 7. Man, we really need to just start playing this.
No, I like the unknown aspect of it.
We are supposed to do Isaiah 9. We're supposed to do Isaiah 7 next week.
Gotcha. Okay,
I
so
had it,
what do we
I
got?
had it, I
Oh, I
looked at
got.
the wrong page of my phase. All right.
What do we got next?
We got Isaiah 9:6. His dominion is vast and forever peaceful upon David's throne and over his kingdom, which he confirms and sustains by judgment and justice, both now and forever. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this.
My scriptures can and it's like entirely different.
Oh,
For us,
this should be interesting.
for to, for to us a child is born, and a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace.
Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6.
Yeah. What are you reading?
Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6.
That was like apples to oranges right there.
Yeah.
I mean, I like my version because I mean, it's got the Wonderful Counselor, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Shout out Maverick City.
I like mine. His dominion's vast and forever peaceful upon David's throne. Yeah, I don't know.
That's a wild translation there.
Yeah, someone who knows more about us about biblical and theology, comment below who's right and why and
Soft
what.
toss and lefty, we're counting on you.
Yeah, someone give us the Latin translation and get some I don't know. What did the church fathers have to say about this?
I mean, I'm not no church father, but I think it kind of goes back to that idea of leadership. I
Yeah, I
think
mean,
we
like
live in a very
we're joking because these don't actually they're different, but they're not it's the same message.
it's the same but different.
Yeah, but leadership going.
I think it is true the fact that I think we try to look to the like officials for answers that again only God has the wisdom, and we look at it and the government will be on his shoulders, and we can call him Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. And I think it's just cool when you compare those words describing God, and then you look in the New Testament and you kind of see it all come to life.
How
Right?
about you? Are you wise and worthy of following?
I try to, but I don't think it's the answer.
Yeah, but I mean, why would you be doing it if you didn't think that there was some truth and desire to do what you're doing? I could be posting the same stuff too, but I really just have no desire to share it.
I think it's just because like I enjoy the process of being able to explain my thoughts. And I also just use it as a journal to kind of like look back on my old philosophies and how I've grown
Mhm.
as well. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't think I agree with every post I've ever posted.
Yeah, and well, you might want to check that. You know, people keep receipts. People are going to look at your posts from 6 years ago and judge you on them.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's good to show like an evolution of your thought process. I mean, everything I've posted recently, obviously, I stand firm to that because that's my current thought process. But what's to say that 2 years from now, I'll look at those posts and I'll think that I'm wrong? And
I
I
mean,
think
I
that
guess
kind of
I
goes
guess
back
that
to
is
like the
I guess
humility
that's
aspect.
yeah. I mean, that's being a healthy learner is you're making statements, believing them to be true. You're not just flipping on everything. You're just gradually adding more pieces to the puzzle over time.
Yeah, obviously, we want to have strong values, but I think the worst people are the ones that believe the same thing they believed 10 years ago,
Yeah, I
other
mean,
than your
I
core
think
values.
yeah. I think everyone has their sort of the word I'm thinking I can't help not sound like a nerd, but their coefficient or their multiplier that
Yeah.
some people can change a lot quicker than others, but that's just because they have certain personality
Mm.
traits that get in there, and some people it's a little more of a slower process. So I think that that's probably where I would say that it's yeah. Sometimes some people you can change it, and because there's pros and cons. You can if you're changing everything one day in one day, you don't really have those firm
No,
values.
yeah.
So
If you're changing everything all the
like,
time and you have no firm value that you're standing on,
but I mean, realistically, in like a sports application, I'm sure you've been told and by a coach, it's like you get 1% better every day.
I hate that saying.
You hate that saying.
I think it's eyewash.
I think it's a little eyewash too.
You do. I think some days you
Don't
don't do
no, like
better.
progress looks like this.
Yeah. And I feel like the 1% better is saying it's a straight and linear progress.
Right. And I think that's something that we fall into a lot in life that we think we're maybe making process, but we look at ourselves 2, 3 years later and we're like, I'm really not that different.
Let's say your goal was to hit a max deadlift PR.
Yeah.
You didn't hit your max deadlift PR. Obviously, there's a bunch of other things that goes on in life that day, but you didn't get 1% better on that particular thing. And then coach is going to be like, you got 1% better today. It's like, no, just because you showed up, you didn't get 1% better today. Go back tomorrow, chalk it up. It's another day. It's like the quote or the scripture in Proverbs. It's like mere talk leads only to poverty. I feel like getting 1% better every day is a mere talk that leads only to poverty because you don't get 1% better every day. I feel like that's kind of just a
No,
fact.
you don't. Because that's the advice that I've taken when it comes to like reflecting on your day and everything is try and because I tend to go way too much into the negatives.
Life is like an up and down, and I think it's good to kind of journal your current thoughts. But I think the idea of like writing down things you accomplished each day is just kind of like, dude, just sit down with your thoughts for 10 minutes and just let them fly rather than just like, I did
Yeah,
this today, chalk it up as a win. I didn't do this today.
that's
You know what I mean?
that's where I was going if you hadn't so rudely interrupted me.
Oh,
That I was just
sorry.
trying to say that there is a balance that you're going to be able to look at yourself at the end of the day and say, I did 3 to 5 things really good. But yeah, you can't just look at one of the good things and say, oh, well, I did this and I got better. If you can just avoid doing that and kind of maybe not get as worse. But yeah, it is hard to really look day by day and think, am I getting better today? And that's why I think it's good to chronicle those things over whether it's a social media journal or a little literal journal or just to kind of be self-aware to like where am I being different. I think relationships and growing as a leader can be a good judgment of that or a good indicator of that too, that if more people are listening to you and you feel like you're growing more as a leader, that's probably a good sign that you're doing something right
Right.
and that you're growing in the sense that you're helping somebody else grow because that's essentially what all of life comes down to.
Yeah. And I think that's like when you ask me like why I post on social media, I think that kind of sums it up there. Even if my post could touch one person that sees that entire thing, like if they see me doing or if they see our podcast and it encourages them to open up the Bible and read a little bit, or if they see, that's why I've really tried to shift my focus on posting just a wide variety of things.
Yeah.
I think before I was just so like only posting weight room content, but I think
Yeah.
training in life is more just psychological than anything else. And so like if
Mhm.
I just can post a wide variety of things and that can and one of those things can inspire people, I think that's kind of the cool part of it. So why do you post?
I don't post. Just I just
Um,
go on Instagram whenever you tell me that you want to collab me.
yeah, that's true. You need to step it up on the collabs.
I'm out on social media. There's good and bad. There's good things you can learn on social media. Realistically, when you go on social media, you have to resign yourself to the fact that you're probably going to spend more of time wasting it, just scrolling through stuff,
Yep.
not really learning stuff. So that's why I'm not active. It's just, it's not, I can probably go on Instagram for 30 seconds and get about as much utility from it as if I were to go on for 30 minutes.
That's
You get
nice.
a couple more funny DMs about the come get your boy or what whoever there is, but like
Oh man. Yeah, this with this one off the rails fast. I think this is a good wrap up part.
I don't know.
So I'd ask what we have next week for the series, but I know that you don't have a plan.
Yeah, there's the that's the thing is I'm gonna tell you right now that I'm gonna have a plan and there's you're not gonna have it.
Well, for the people that actually want to know, I think we're good on the leading up to Jesus part. So all the prophecies I kind of talked about him, touched in their first episode about creation, first sin of mankind, and kind of have led up to the anticipation of Jesus coming into the world. So I think that's kind of where we'll transition our lens next week. We'll probably touch upon the virgin birth and the significance behind that. Um, a lot of cool things with Jesus actually going on his ministry. So with that, I will close us in prayer and we'll wrap it up from there. Unless you had anything you want to add.
No, I'm good. Just end this. This has been a gong show.
It always is. Well, dear God, I want to thank you for allowing us to carve out this time today to dive a little bit deeper into your word and just to, communicate as well. I think that's an important quality that we need to keep as individuals is the ability to communicate with one another. And especially on topics like this, as we lead up to Christmas, Lord, help us to stay in the moment during all the craziness of this holiday season and help us to look towards your truth for the meaning of life. Pray this all in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you for joining us today. As always, stay juicy.